I call to order the October Finance Committee meeting. If the secretary please call the roll. Or clerk, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Here.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you very much. Due to the Safer at Home order, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there's a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. A committee member will be recognized and will raise their hand and state their vote. Thank y'all very much. I would also like to read a census update statement. The Census Bureau has extended the deadline for completing the census to October 31st. A complete and accurate count in Winston-Salem is imperative for us to receive federal funding for dozens of programs and to ensure fair representation. If you have not yet responded to the census, please do so. If you can go online to my2020census.gov or call 844-330-2020. It takes about 10 minutes and will benefit our community for the next 10 years. Thank you. With that, as normal, we will start with a consent agenda. And I do have a note that Mr. McIntosh would like C4 pulled. I had that one as well, so we'll pull C4. Are there any other items anyone would like pulled?
C1, C6, and C7.
Okay, Ms. Adams, could you go a little slower? C1.
C6.
Yeah.
And C7.
7, okay. Thank you. But I do not hear any more. Can I get a motion for someone to approve the balance of the consent?
I'd make a motion to approve the balance.
Is there a second?
Second, McIntosh.
So Taylor has made a motion to approve. McIntosh has seconded. I will go by roll call. Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Aye.
Mr. McIntosh.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Yay.
And Mr. Clark votes yes. So the balance of the consent is approved. We will go in numerical order. The clerk will please read C1.
Item C1, Internal Audit Annual Report.
Ms. Adams, you have the floor.
I think it's important always, since we implemented the internal audit process for the city, that the public has an opportunity to hear basically what this audit is and was about.
Okay. Bear with me 1 second. Before I recognize Mr. Rao, I did request a month or so ago for Mr. Rao to put, and to do this annually, to put the annual review of the internal audit department. I think it's important to us for a reference standpoint just to review them. So Mr. Rao, if you're there, will you please comment on the various items that are presented here?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joins, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the City Council. I'm actually going to recognize Scott Tesh, who's our Performance and Accountability Director. It's the Internal Audit Office is located within his department, and he'll be able to provide you more details about the internal audit's work plan for this past fiscal year.
Okay, Mr. Tesh, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joins, and members of the committee and council. As Assistant City Manager Ben Rowell said, this is an item to look at the annual work plan, a summary of the fiscal year 2019-2020 internal audit annual work plan. The Internal Audit Division is an autonomous assurance and consulting service for internal services for the city. Their regular work plan typically includes audits and projects related to purchasing compliance, cash handling. We do personally identifying information audits, performance and contracting requirements, and other projects based on management needs. And so you see many of those types of projects here in the information item before you. The summary itself of the projects that were completed from the FY 19-20 work plan with significant findings noted and observations as well. If you have any specific questions about the internal audit work plan for 19-20 or any of the observations and findings that we've listed here, I'd be more than happy to answer any of those questions. We have also attached the FY 2021 work plan for the Internal Audit Division for this year.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, would you like any comments on specific ones?
Yes, the ones where we had compliance findings, I think we need to name some of them exactly. I mean, how many do we have? And I
Okay.
apologize, I didn't look at it that clearly, but anytime you have an audit and you have compliance findings, we
Yep.
need to hear it. So I need you to tell me what they are.
Mr. Teske, if you could go over the ones that have exceptions.
Yes, sir. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Adams. We'll go through the list here, starting on page 1. The vendor selection compliance audit did not have any significant findings or observations. I will tell you, we use some criteria for what significant means. So there may be some of these audits that had less significant findings and observations. All of those are available on the city's website, and we could get a report back to you on all of the findings and observations if you needed them. The second one there is the employee data project. That was a consulting project that was done by the Internal Audit Division, not necessarily in audit form. The former Human Resources Director had asked that we look into some data entry that was happening in her office. We did actually not find the errors that they assumed were happening, but found a couple of other things that we considered inconsistencies with the personnel resolution. You see those listed there. Be it that the pay table in the personnel resolution had a few inconsistencies. There were a couple of promotions that were not in line with the personnel resolution, temporary promotion issue, and a few other things related to pay frequencies. Our Human Resources Director retired earlier in the year, and we will be taking these up with the new Human Resources Director. I believe we have a meeting scheduled next week to bring him up to speed on these issues. The next one you see on there, the Thunderbirds concessions contract. There were a couple of issues with the Thunderbirds not meeting contract requirements. The first one related to the way that they were calculating the amount of money that they were supposed to give us back for third-party sales. There was some issue as to how to calculate 30% as a percentage of net sales or net profit. So we worked with them on understanding the contract for that one. They were not using the concession or the credit card machines correctly for all of the sales. They have agreed to do that. And I believe the third piece there, not supporting, or the city was not getting all of the documentation that it needed with when they were submitting monies to us. And so we have staff has ensured us that they will be at the fairgrounds getting all of the reports that they need in order to take the money in and have a full accountancy and backup documentation for it. No significant findings in the DOT purchasing audit or in the field operations purchasing audit. You see a note there for the Power Bill expenditure review. Initially, the backup documentation for a couple of those services was not sufficient to be able to claim reimbursement through the State Street Aid Program. After going back and working with vegetation management, operations, and the city's IS department, we were able to claim $1.1 million in expenditures and have adequate backup for those. The next one on there, public assembly facilities cash receipts compliance. These were not for cash sitting on hand, but these were for entry into the finance system. The city policy requires that within 3 business days, any money deposited must be given to the finance department or entered into the finance system, and they missed that a few times. I believe we have the same issue in parking, in parking with entry into the finance system, and no issues with the inventory observations noted here. So in terms of the criteria we used for significance, in some of these cases, when a sample is taken, if more than 5 instances were noted or more than 10% of the sample had an issue, we considered it a significant observation based on how many inconsistencies we saw with policy or procedure.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a big concern for us as a city. I think that we are not, to me, taking audit compliance exceptions as serious as we should. Mr. Tesh, I know you've noticed some corrective and preventive action, but I don't think this is the complete end-all be-all as to the continuing process piece, improvement piece. And I would like more details in the council on these compliance and exception issues. We have a problem. And if staff and the city manager doesn't think so, then we might even have a bigger problem. But Mr. Chair, I'm concerned. I really am concerned because it leaves me to think again, and I know sometimes I overreact or get over emotional, but it is very necessary that we know our processes and systems are working, and that you can't continue to have exceptions and compliance issues to the process and not put in continuous improvement that it works, you prove it works, and report back to this council that the things we put in place for corrective and preventive action are working and are audited as we go forward.
What I would suggest we do is maybe a couple of months into the year, maybe April or so, get an update from the departments to be sure they've implemented it in, because we'll have another report probably this time next year that will summarize the action plan results from this year's audit, the internal audits. So thank you, Ms. Adams. All right. With that, we will now go to, Mr. Larson would like to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Is any revenue that we can document been lost to the city in all of this audit? First of all, I appreciate the comprehensive-ness of it, and it certainly has revealed some weaknesses in our accounting process and submittals. But do we have any record of revenues actually not being acquired as a result of this process that we find shortcomings?
Thank you, Councilman Larson. I will say, in terms of saying this is an audit, these are a series of audits that were done over the course of the year. There is one in which we might would say that the Thunderbirds concessions management contract, the revenue, and you'll see if you look at the bottom of, I believe it's page 2, the first bullet point, due to miscalculations of third-party percentage of net profit and sales tax, net profits payable to the city were underreported by approximately $24,600.
Right.
That is the only instance that we have revenues being
not being paid
by the city.
Yeah.
And again, that was not, I do not believe an intentional or willful thing on the part of the contractor. It was a misinterpretation of the way that they were calculating net profits versus net revenues for third-party sales that happen at concessions at the fairgrounds.
So none of that is recoverable.
I will have to get back to you on our ability to recover that going back.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will now go the C4. If the clerk will please read C4.
Chair,
Oh, excuse me.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Again,
Ms.
I ask that we receive the corrective and preventive action and the continuous improvement on these findings within a certain amount, a reasonable amount of time, and not wait until 2 or 3 months from now, because I need to know that we have corrected these issues and we won't see this again on the next audit.
Okay, we'll see what we can do there. Okay.
Chair, do we need a motion on that?
Well, I mean, like, for example, you can't know what the Thunderbirds are doing until the season starts. But no, there's no
But
action.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead. And the other one is some forms weren't being signed. Well, I'm not concerned that they're signing them now. I want to be sure that it's in place so they always sign them. And that's why I think you need to take a look a couple of months from now on some of these. But the Thunderbirds, their season would typically start in January or something, I would guess, for hockey, December. Somebody help me, something like that.
About December, January. This year's a little in flux.
Yeah, so we may not be able to know if the Thunderbirds are doing it correctly till they can do it again, which may be March or April next year. I don't know about sports and things, given COVID. But I think the message to the staff is that we need to be sure these are being addressed, and I think they can take care of the details of that. Ms. Adams, you have one more comment?
One more comment, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I think it's, again, imperative, as even Councilmember McIntosh, we cannot, again, staff wait until the Thunderbirds start or whatever. These conversations and corrective and preventive actions need to be put in place as soon as possible. And the council needs to receive the report with the issue. What was the cause? What's the corrective and preventive action going forward for continuous improvement?
Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
my point, Ms. Adams, you cannot check with the Thunderbirds to see if they're doing it correctly till they do it. And they may not do it for another year till the season starts, because this has to do with concessions. So when they do start and have concessions, that's the time to check to be sure they're doing the math right. That's my point. Mr. McIntosh.
Can I ask that we bring this item back next month and just get a report from staff on what corrective actions can be taken now and what actions need to happen in the heat of battle?
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, if I might very quickly, the item for every finding and observation, at least for the findings, a management response is required for all of them. They are reported here in this, but we can gather all of those management responses together for the corrective actions that are supposed to take place. And then internal audit does follow-up reports on significant findings down the road to ensure that they have actually been followed up on and that the corrective actions have taken place as stated.
Like if you could put it in some type of chart would be good for us. One page summary. Okay. C4, please.
Item C4, update on proposed budget for allocation of the 2018 housing bond funds.
Ms. Logan Ford, could you comment on this? And Mr. McIntosh, I'm glad you pulled this because we've got X amount of housing bond money and we need to be sure where it's going because we got a lot of requests coming forward. So Ms. Logan Ford, if you'll comment on it, then Mr. McIntosh, I'll let you have the floor.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Mayor, members of council. The item before you is a review of where we are with our current housing bond budget. The budget was originally presented and approved by council in August of 2019. But we thought it would be prudent to just bring this budget back before you to just share where we are, show funds that have been spent out of the housing bond budgets, and also to be able to share with you projects that we're aware of that might be coming down the pike that we need to be aware of. So at this time, I would ask Ms. Newman, our Community Development Director, if she would share the specifics in terms of where we are with the housing bond budgets, and then we'll address any questions that the council may have. Ms. Newman?
Thank you, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee. In the information item that you have in front of you, as Ms. Logan Ford stated, you see the breakdown on the original budget that was approved by council in August of 2019. Continuing on this document, you will see the actuals to date, and we kept the same categories as you approved with each line item. As you will see under targeted acquisition and site prep, which was one of the larger budget line items, right now we have pending from this particular line item part of the commitment that we made to the Choice Neighborhoods initiative. And when we did our letter of support that accompanied the application, housing bond funds were part of a larger compilation of funds that were represented as may be available to help support the project. You will see that there'll be two line items dealing with Choice Neighborhoods implementation, and part of that is because of the total amount that we have indicated would be available to support Choice Neighborhoods. The employer assisted housing pilot, which was $250,000, that work is actually underway. We have been working closely with a team of volunteers from the Affordable Housing Coalition, and we have been in conversations with both Novant Health as well as Wake Forest Baptist Hospital, who have both indicated an interest in both the employer assisted housing program as well as some wider affordable housing initiatives. So we are currently in conversation with them. Staff has provided information on other successful employer assisted housing programs going on around the nation, particularly those tied to other healthcare institutions. Under development incentives, which was the largest line item, Currently, we've spent $300,000 towards the Peters Creek Community Initiative. That was in connection with the Budget Inn Motel demolition and getting that project ready for breaking ground soon. And then also, you see again the Choice Neighborhoods implementation phase, 167,700 we used as part of the pre-development application and preparations for the HUD site visit back in February. And then 2 million, I'm sorry, of the total now 3 million is what has been pledged to support the initiative. Turn round 2, that budget line item is 2 million. The 81,500 is a combination of both housing assistance in the Southeast Ward, as well as some of the administrative cost for staff. That budget, when split out, had about $500,000 for administrative support, 1.5 million for additional funds to go into housing rehabilitation. The Southeast Ward had expended all of its round 1 monies and has now started to draw on the round $2. Code enforcement and CCP, that is the line item that supports the acquisition and conversion to the new Acela software system. If you recall, the current software system that we're using for code enforcement is 25 years old. And so nearly 700,000 of this 750 has been designated for the new system, as well as covering some of the costs that were associated with the study that was done by the Center for Community Progress, looking at vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated properties, which of course ties directly to code enforcement. Then the last item you see is the For Everyone Home initiative with the Grounded Solutions Network. You allocated $1 million for that. The $75,000 that has been expended to date is the required match for that grant opportunity. If you recall, the grant also had another $250,000 that came from the Ford Foundation to support this initiative, which was is the anti-displacement pilot program to look at what the current state of housing is and our risk for displacement concerns. And we are at the point in the study where the assessment of our risk has been provided. That was part of a council presentation back in June. And now we are doing an exploration of the various policy initiatives that can work to prevent displacement. And then the balance of the funds that are in this line item then would support any actual actions that we would take to support anti-displacement activities. So that's kind of a rundown of where we are. Certainly there's some things that will be spent over time, particularly the turn dollars will be spent over a period of time. And then the remaining dollars for the targeted acquisition and site prep, which will leave us 1.5 million, and then the remaining money for development incentives, the $1,032,300. Those are the dollars that essentially we have left to actually use to support some of the development projects that the city is particularly interested in doing to make sure we have more affordable housing available. So that's the overview of the budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. McIntosh, you have the floor.
Right, so this is strictly bond money that was approved by the voters back in 2016? 18.
Wait, where am I? What year am I? I'm sorry, 18.
This does, in the era of COVID. This does not include home funds, CDBG money, or other revenues. This is strictly bond money, correct?
You are correct.
Okay. Are there things on the horizon that you can talk about that we should know in terms of other significant requests or draws on the remaining 5.7 that's not committed?
So in terms of really what would be available for projects, we're looking at, what's that, 1.532 million. So really, no, I'm sorry, 2.5.
2.5 million.
2.5 million is what we have left that can go towards projects. At this moment, we don't have anything firm. I think we've had a couple of requests support, that we've looked at some other funding mechanisms and largely looking at the other funding mechanisms to try to protect these funds, especially for the developments that the city is looking at sponsoring. So for instance, where we've discussed doing an RFP for Ridgewood, because it will be mixed income, then some of the bond funds could potentially be used to support that, as well as some of our federal funds to get at the levels of affordability we're looking at. So the idea is to, if possible, utilize these funds in a way that really helps us expand the affordable housing that we're able to either sponsor directly, or we know will have a greater opportunity to meet the wide range of affordability that we're looking for.
Okay. Anyone else have it? This is just for information only.
Mr. Chairman?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, yes, got you. You got it.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Newman, thank you for this. Not holding you to any numbers, but if you had to guess or put a number on it, how many affordable units you think we will get out of this 4.3 thereabouts that have already kind of got allocated to various line items there? How many units you think we might get out of this?
I'm sorry, out of which line item, sir? I'm sorry.
Well, all of it. If you take the 4.3, if you just kind of had to make a sort of a educated guess about, are we going to get 200 units out of this, or 250, or what it might be?
He's adding the actual and the pending together for the 4.2.
Yeah, right.
I would guess maybe 100, 150, and that's a real guess.
Okay, so that's
even with some of those actuals, you know, some of that, for instance, like Peters Creek, we have some units there. The 167 with Choice, that was all pre-development. So basically, anything below the Choice neighborhoods under development incentives isn't necessarily designed for hardcore units, as opposed to, for instance, rehab and other activities. So new units, rehab units. And so when I said the initial rehab, that was for the homeowner rehab units.
Yeah.
In terms of actual new housing units, I'm guessing probably 150, thereabouts.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's my point, I think, is that we've got to create 14,600 or so units over the next 8 years. So that's our goal. And so you can see very quickly, we're going to spend, almost not quite half of, but it's called 40% of our bonds that were approved in 18, going to get, a couple hundred units. So we got to, I think, be really, really judicious and look for ways to leverage our dollars with the private sector to get many more units kind of produced out of investment there. I know that's a blinding glimpse of the obvious, but I think it's important to note. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Adams?
Yes, as I emailed some of you a few weeks ago, I think we need to look forward to implementing or instituting a possible bond in 2022, a housing bond that Representative Montgomery, when he was on the council, attempted to prompt us to move in that direction for over 5 or 6 years. If we look at other cities, whether it's Charlotte, Durham, Raleigh, Greensboro, we need to go ahead and look at what they've done. And I know our AMI is not equal to theirs, but I think if we're going to make any strides and be serious and intentional about creating housing, whether it's affordable, workforce, or income-based, I think we need to go ahead and start looking at what we can do or what needs to happen or how it would impact our city citizens to implement a housing bond in 2022.
Thank you. Mr. Larson?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to discuss a little bit on the Turn Round 2 program. We still got $1.9 million sitting in that fund. And I'm asking basically, is this the result of the boundaries that are currently established? Are we looking at trying to change the boundaries to open that program up to more possible people?
No, sir.
Go ahead. Ms. Levin, go ahead.
This has no bearing on the boundaries. At this juncture, we have a couple of things. First and foremost, because we have remaining funds from 2014, we are trying to spend those down first before we go into the round $2. So that's the first thing. In terms of the uptake in the number of applications, it has been interesting to see where more of the applications have come. So by and large, as I stated earlier, for instance, the Southeast Ward utilized their entire pot of $800,000 from round one and is now dipping into round two. Some of the other wards have not had the same level of uptake. And while we've had a number of applications, of course, participation is not guaranteed. So you still have to meet credit criteria, you still have to have clear title, and a number of other things to be eligible to participate in the program. I suspect that that has been some of the impediment in some areas. But in terms of the structure of the program in and of itself, I think that we're solid there. And again, the Southeast Ward has demonstrated that. And so we're just still working through the 2014 dollars before moving into the 2018 pot. So that's why you see a high balance there.
These boundaries were established back when, though? The boundaries for the TURN program are fairly old.
If I recall correctly, those boundaries were established in about 2013, 2014.
That's right.
Consistent with the first round of bond funds.
So my concern and my question is, are they still relevant? And my feeling is that parts of our town that could use this money if the boundaries were adjusted to incorporate them. And if we wanted to have that happen, what do we have to do?
Let me break in here. I don't want to steal the responsibility or the authority of the General Government Housing Committee. This was just presented from a budget financial standpoint. I think questions like that, and I know Ms. Adams is listening because she's here, I think that's a good one, and I think I will pass that on to her as chair of the Housing Committee to really look at those boundaries.
Thank you.
But anyway. All righty, so that's for information. Thank y'all. We'll now go to C6, please. Miss, if the clerk will please read that.
Item C6, resolution awarding construction contract for playground renovations, Group 2, for Brushy Fork and Winston Lake, number 1, 3, 4, to Bar Construction Company, Incorporated.
Mr. McIntosh, no, excuse me, Ms. Adams, you asked for this one.
Yes, Mr. Chair. This C6 and C7 and a later item in the general agenda for me are all kind of tied together. I still have some concerns about our minority women in business contracting and procurement process. I received numerous calls from minority contractors concerned about our process. And whether we go and take this offline, Mr. Chair, I've read through both of these. And when I can read that, you know, I know the Minority Business Women Committee or Commission review this. I think we may need to look at another level or layer or something of procurement transparency, because we know that when people keep reporting stuff to us, and we just think that, you know, our process is great. I think we have an opportunity and a responsibility to be more responsive. And for example, in item K on page 3 of C6, where it says, did the company offer to joint venture or partner with minority women in business firms, and the contractor did not and got no points.
Yeah.
To me, that's a red flag if we're intentional about ensuring equitable participation of my minorities in the contract process. I just want to know, again, you know, I don't know, Mr. Chair, but something's wrong and I got to call it out.
Okay. Well, again, if I'm reading on here, they got 156 out of 180 points, and 115 is required. So they're well past that. I think if we want to change this form, we can. But again, I think that's really more your committee to look at. But the folks did what we asked them to do. They made the grade required. But and again, I'm not trying to overload your committee. I'm just trying to see if we
and
can.
I know, Mr. Chair, And I'm okay with that, but I just, in my commentary, not necessarily a question, I just want to bring it to light to the council and the people, city, that I'm going to be looking at how we can make this better, because right now, the volume of calls that I'm getting, I'm not happy.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments on C6? Ms. Adams, you had this pulled. Would you mind making a motion then?
I move for approval of consent item 6.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, McIntosh.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll poll the committee to vote. Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yay.
And Mr. Clark votes yes. So that's done. Thank y'all. By the way, Ms. Adams, I'm not trying to overload your committee, but I'm also trying not to step on your toes.
But that's all right. I take the work. I'll own it.
Okay. The next one was pulled again. It's the clerk will please read this one, C7.
Item C7, resolution awarding construction contract for Carl Russell Community Center renovations to Magnolia Construction LLC.
Okay, Ms. Adams, you have the floor again.
And Mr. Chair, I'll just say the comments made for C6 apply to C7.
Okay. Thank you.
General government will be looking into this, and I move for approval.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion for a second, please?
Second, McIntosh.
Okay, Ms. Parman had a question or a comment. Ms. Parman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With this contract bidding going to Magnolia and that being in Northeast Ward, I did a little investigate myself, and I understand that it's under the minority business. But at the same time, when you read all the details about it, the minorities and the percentages of the way that it leans is you have 23 males and 3 females, but 26 of them are white and only one is a Native American. So there isn't really a broad spectrum of that minority basis as which we talk about with diversity and inclusion. Yep. So thank you for actually pulling that item so that we can have further discussion about it over at the community development side.
Okay, thank you. And I will say, and I've been on the council 19 years, I think that form that Ms. Adams refers to has been changed several times over the years, if my memory is correct. Anyway, we have a motion and a second, so I will now poll the members on C7. Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yay.
And Mr. Clark votes yes. So that finishes the consent. Thank you all very much. Before we start the general agenda, staff has asked that we pull items G4 and G5 for further work. So G4 and G5 have been sent back to staff for work. So with that, we will just start with G1 and work our way through them. Ms. Tony, I know you're there. You have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Chairman Clark, and members of the committee and council. As you're aware, we were requested to provide updates regularly on our major revenues. At the time, there was so much uncertainty about the revenue projections, and so each month we will continue to provide an update as we get updates. So since last month, we have some updates for sales tax and utility franchise taxes. So for the countywide sales tax, we projected a decline of 20%. And that decline was from April, May, and June. And the actual distribution of the decline was 1.6%. So that is actually, we came out much better than we projected. Keep in mind, as was mentioned at the previous meeting, is that these revenues will be applied to FY20. So we are not seeing the effects of this current fiscal year. And so our end of the year outlook is improved because of the better sales tax numbers. And so staff projects a 20% reduction for the statewide sales tax also for July, August, and September. So we are monitoring the impact As I mentioned before, some of the increase may be due to federal stimulus and unemployment benefits. And so as those are weaned off, or if there's no additional stimulus, we may see some kind of impact to sales tax. So that's the update for sales tax. And then moving on to utility franchise tax, we received $379,000 less than anticipated. So within utility franchise tax, that is electricity, which that was down $178,000 less than projected for the quarter. And then we also have telecommunications franchise taxes. That particular area is driven by landline use, and so that was down by $158,000. As mentioned before, we believe less people have home phones or what we call landlines, so there is a decline in that as well. So the projected decrease was 9%, but the actual decrease was 45%. So we will probably end the year under budget in utility franchise taxes by $879,000.
I'm still seeing the sales tax.
Mayor, if you could scroll down.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that was the utility franchise tax. So that will be under budget, just based on the trends of electricity as well as telecommunications. And then the last point that I'll just make is that the North Carolina Department of Transportation, the DOT, reduced the overall power bill disbursement to all municipalities by $4.4 million. And that was in order to adjust their budget for maintenance and emergencies. And so this reduces the projected allocation of power bill revenues to Winston-Salem by slightly over $208,000.
Do we have a graph on the power money in here?
No.
There's no graph, okay. Just fairgrounds and parking. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that ends my report.
Thank you very much. I will say, I think we're all a little surprised that given in the months we talked about here, April, May, and June, the unemployment went to 18%, but I do think the generous unemployment benefits and the $1,200 one-time payment seem to have made a difference. The first numbers that actually go for our current year budget, which are July, we will get in about 20 more days or so, something like that.
Yep.
Anyway, Mr. McIntosh, you asked to be recognized.
Yeah, so Ms. Tony, the bloodbath in the utility franchise tax revenues, how much of that has to do with the fact that utilities were not allowed to cut off customers, and so there was a bunch of non-payment? I guess my question goes to, is there any chance that if we get a second CARES Act out of DC, that we can pull any money from that based on, folks not paying their bill? I mean, that to me is a COVID-related drop. Do we stand to get any reimbursement on that?
Councilmember McIntosh, that is an excellent question. I do believe that there is some impact to people paying or not paying their electricity bills. And as I said, just dropping their landlines altogether. That is possible. Right now, we just don't know about additional CARES Act funding, but you are right. There will be an impact based on COVID-19 and the impact of that. And so hopefully if we get another stimulus that this would apply and be able to help us out on that.
Thank you.
Ms. Adams.
Yes, Councilmember McIntosh, the latest emails I've received from the National League of Cities, again, that money that we're asking for, the over $500 billion, is for cities, towns, and villages to be able to use for gap revenue funding to help us out. So where we miss revenues and whatever taxes and things, that money will be able to be used because, as you said, the drop in revenue was because of what happened with COVID. So my advice again to everybody, call your U.S. senators and tell them to vote.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. So that finishes G1. We will now go to G2.
Item G2, resolution awarding construction contract for Long Creek Phase 1 improvements project to Granite Co. Incorporated.
Damon, do you have any comments on this one you'd like to make? Or whoever would like to?
No, sir, I don't have any comments.
Okay, this is for the Long Creek improvements, and can I get a motion to approve the low bid?
Motion to approve, McIntosh.
Can I get a second? We have a motion to second to approve G2. I'll go down the roll. Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yay.
Mr. Clark votes yes as well. Thank y'all very much. That's G2. We will now go to G3.
Item G3, consideration of items regarding improvements for the Caladium Museum through a reimbursement agreement. Resolution authorizing and ratifying the expenditure of City County Utility Commission funds generated by outside of county services to offset certain public infrastructure costs associated with project site improvements for Caladium Museum through a reimbursement agreement among the City of Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and Frank L. Bloom Construction Company, or any affiliate or subsidiary thereof. Ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the City of Winston-Salem for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Mr. Raleigh, your name is on this. If you're on the line, I would like for someone to spell out where the source of this money is coming from, because this is a very unusual pot of money that we don't touch very often.
Certainly. Good afternoon, Mayor Joines, Chairman Clark, and members of the committee. So this is a request from Forsyth County to make use of funds that are held in the outside of county utility services fund to help the county offset some of the cost of the installation of some public infrastructure for the Caladium Museum project, which of course is going to be located at the intersection of West 3rd Street and Town Run Lane. Specifically, they're looking for use of up to $48,000 to offset the installation cost of a 3-inch meter and the cost of the sewer system development fees. Just to give you a quick background, because to your point, Chairman, we don't often tap this source of funding. I'll just give you a brief history on it. So the Outside of County Utility Service Fund was established by the Utility Commission in the mid-'70s, primarily to provide support for economic development projects, both within the city and the county. Essentially, the revenues, a portion of the revenues that are generated by utility, by individuals and users outside of Forsyth County. So when we sell water services or sewer services outside of the county, a portion of those revenues go into this fund, and expenditures can be made from this fund so long as both the Board of Forsyth County Commissioners and the Mayor and City Council approve funding for a particular project. And I've included in the item, you can see instances over the last, we'll say 16 years or so, where we have used this particular source of funding. There, I don't know, 5 or 6 projects there. You can see the dates and the amounts that have been pledged from this fund in the past. And so this particular request was approved by the Forsyth County Commissioners during their September 10th meeting. And as the fund requires, that the request is now coming before the Mayor and City Council for its review and approval.
And I will comment, we do not sell as much water and sewer services outside the county as we used to. Greensboro, Guilford County used to buy a fair amount of water, but they built the Randleman Reservoir, dam and reservoir, and I think that's solved a lot of their problems. So it's a fund. We don't put much money into it anymore, and we do take it out at an infrequent basis. Thank you, Mr. Raleigh. Do I have any questions or comments on this? If not, could I get, Ms. Adams, I see your hand, go ahead.
Yes, and maybe I missed it, Mr. Raleigh. What's the balance, Mr. Chair, what's the balance in this account?
Okay. Mr. Raleigh, you know the balance.
Fund.
I do. Yes, the current balance is just north of $3.2 million in the fund.
3.2. Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments? This does require.
One more
both-
question.
Go ahead, Ms. Adams. You certainly go ahead.
You just answered it. I was wondering, does this require both entities, the county and the city, both to agree on the pulling down of these funds?
Yes, it does. And they have, the county has requested it from us, so apparently they have already approved it.
Mr.
Go ahead.
Chair and staff, is there anything we got going on that we could use some of this money for choice or neighborhoods or something else in our communities in the urban core infrastructure? Something housing or somebody, especially with choice, can we take a look at it?
Mayor Pro Tem Adams, I would say that certainly the possibility exists there. This fund, I think so long as it can be used on, the projects are classified as economic development, I'll say broadly defined, and the commissioners can consent to expenditure, certainly that can be used to support, again, but it's limited to public infrastructure. So things like water, sewer, roads.
That's fine.
Yes, so certainly.
Okay. Good point, Ms. Adams. We'll take a look. But yes, you say it's basically water and sewer lines and roads. Those are the main items. Can I get a motion on this, please?
Motion to approve, McIntosh.
We have McIntosh motion, second by Ms. Adams. I'll roll call. Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yay.
Mr. Clark? Yes. Thank y'all very much. We will now move to G4 has been pulled as well as G5. So we will now go down to G6.
Item G6, resolution authorizing an agreement with Frank L. Bloom Construction, WC Construction Joint Venture for construction of improvements to Bowman Gray Stadium at a guaranteed maximum price of $8,037,942, located in the East Ward.
Mr. Rao, your name's on here. Would you mind commenting on this and explaining to us what this is a new type of contract, which to the best of my knowledge, we have not used before. It's called contractor at risk. If you could explain that to us and then answer any questions there may be.
Yes, sir. So back in the fall of last year, the city awarded a contract to Walter Robbs, Callahan and Pierce Architects for design services for this project. And then shortly after that, awarded a contract for pre-construction services to Frank L. Bloom Construction Company, who's also entered into a joint venture with WC Construction Company, a local minority-owned firm, for both pre-construction and construction services for this project. So this is a construction manager at risk project, meaning that they work very closely with the architect from the beginning of the project, and that definitely has occurred all through this calendar year. And then they've been responsible for the bidding of the project. And so to kind of give you an update of where we are, when I provided the update to the committee last month, the design for the project had been finalized and they were starting the process of bidding the construction work for the project. Excuse me. And so after looking at reviewing the bid packages, they've come up with an estimated guaranteed maximum price of $8,037,942. What that means is that is the price that the city will pay for the construction of the project. If the actual costs that Frank L. Bloom were to incur exceeds that amount, the city would not pay that unless it's agreed upon by both parties. If we agree to a change in scope or something like that, then that GMP may increase. If the actual construction costs come in under the GMP amount, then there can be a discussion between the city and Frank L. Bloom and WC Construction, the joint venture, about splitting the savings or looking to do more, make more improvements using those funds. We do have ad alternates that are part of the project. They are not reflected in the GMP. So the GMP reflects just the base scope for this project, and that would include replacement of the restrooms, the concession stands, the regrading of the football field, resurfacing of the racetrack, replacing the seat back chairs in front of the west press box, replacing the HVAC system in the field house, making some other aesthetic upgrades to the facility. So That's all reflected in the $8 million in the guaranteed maximum price. On page 2 of the council action, you can see a summary of and the breakdown of the estimated cost for the project. So we had budgeted $9 million, and you can see how we generally have split our budgets for projects: 10% for design, 80% for construction, and 10% for what we call project contingency. So you can see there that we've come in under budget on our design costs. Right now, the GMP is over the budget amount, but we're also under budget on how much contingency we have for the project. So we have tapped in to some of the contingency. The GMP does include other contingencies such as contractor and owner contingencies. So we have overall between the contingency and the GMP, and then the overall project contingency, probably still about a little over $500,000 in contingency funds, which we feel like we want to reserve, because you just never know what kind of issues may come up. We feel good about what we know because of this new process, and the fact that the architect and Frank L. Bloom and WC Construction have worked so closely over the course of this year to develop the design and the scope of the project. So in terms of the NWBE results, Frank L. Bloom, based on the bids that they have received, 35.69% of the subcontracted work would go to HUB certified minority or women-owned businesses. The breakdown in that percentage is 16.52% to minority-owned firms and 19.17% to women-owned firms. That's in addition to the joint venture between Frank L. Bloom and WC Construction, which is a 65%, 35% partnership. If the council approves the GMP and awards the agreement this month, then Frank L. Bloom is prepared to start mobilizing for construction at the end of this month, with the plans to actually start construction in early November. The first phase is going to focus on the restrooms and a concession stand, and then also start the work on the football field, to have the football field in place as we move into the spring, continue to work through the project all through the summer. And then the last phase, which would occur after the 2021 Winston-Salem State football season, do the resurfacing of the track. So the project overall is scheduled to be completed in early 2022, before the 2022 NASCAR racing season. So the action before the Finance Committee today is recommending approval of awarding a contract to Frank L. Bloom Construction, WC Construction joint venture for the construction of the improvements at a guaranteed maximum price of $8,037,942, and the NWB participation goals as I mentioned earlier. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Adams, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I have concerns, again, as I voiced earlier, for 2 other consent items of the city's position on where we are with minorities and women businesses when it comes to contract bidding. I can understand the goals look good, but we still need to understand who is benefiting from this, and how, again, we can be more equitable and intention in ensuring that minority women and men, and when I say that, I mean minorities that are of color, Black and brown and others, and not women. The women category, we know how that goes, but we need to make sure that Black and brown people are benefiting from their tax dollars when it comes to contract. I applaud the companies that get the contracts. If you notice, Frank L. Bloom has 2 major contracts with us in this meeting. And what we're seeing is, and I've talked to a lot of other smaller contractors, Mr. Chair, because of the economic situation of COVID and others, larger companies in our community are now bidding for contracts that smaller businesses would or might consider bidding for, because they don't have the resources that the bigger companies do. So I just wanted my comments for the record that the General Government, Community Development, and Housing Committee will be looking at how we can make this procurement and contract bid more equitable to the brown and black community of Winston-Salem.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, could I get a motion to, on the item, on G6?
Motion to approve, McIntosh.
Do I have a second? I'll second then. We have a motion and a second on G6. I will now poll the council. Ms. Adams?
Again, I will vote yes, but under protest.
Thank you. Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yay.
And Ms. Clark votes yes. If I could ask, bear with me one second. Mr. Rao, I don't know if it's far enough along to be able to provide this, if they could give us the names of the minority contractors or subs, I mean, who they are and maybe what trade it is and whatever information we normally get on
Yes.
subs. Be
We'll
nice.
provide that. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And provide it to the General Government Committee also.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right. G7, if this clerk will please read this.
Item G7, consideration of items regarding reinstating economic development agreement between the City of Winston-Salem and Enmar Incorporated. Resolution rescinding the previously approved resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement for the Venture Winston-Salem Grants Program and rescinding the resolution authorizing the termination of the economic development agreement between the City of Winston-Salem and Enmar Incorporated. Ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina for the fiscal year 2020-2021.
Thank you. Mr. Raleigh, I'm going to ask you to comment on this, and I believe the contract was never signed on this. Is that correct? So if you could, in general, comment on this, Mr. Raleigh, you have the floor.
Certainly. Chairman Clark, members of the committee and council. So this item would essentially rescind, it would restore the funding that was previously moved from the Enmar Economic Development Incentive Agreement and put it to support the Venture Winston initiative and basically move those funds back to the Enmar Economic Development Agreement. And I'll take you through some history. If you remember, in February of this year, you all approved the termination of the previously approved economic development agreement between the city and Enmar with the idea that those funds would then go to support the Venture Winston initiative. At the Venture Winston initiative, if you do not recall, was an initiative that was backed by a number of local organizations in the entrepreneurial ecospace here locally. And it was modeled off of a program called Arch Grants in the city of St. Louis. That initiative, essentially what it does is it attracts startup businesses to St. Louis by providing them $50,000 in equity-free grants and support services. So it's a business attraction program. So council set aside basically move the money, and Enmar basically stepped forward to make funds that had been originally pledged to their economic development agreement to free up those funds to support the operation of this Venture Winston initiative. And so after council authorized the termination of that agreement, staff reached out to representatives from Enmar, and essentially they made the decision to not move forward with the termination of their economic development agreement. The process would have required them to sign a formal agreement which would release the city from any and all future claims against those funds, and they elected not to execute those documents. And so they have subsequently requested that those funds that were previously moved to support this initiative be restored to them, which would essentially allow them to continue on with the economic development agreement that they had in place and was originally approved by council, I believe, in 2012 or 2013.
Thank you. Mr. Raleigh, this is basically their money.
That's correct.
So they just wanted us to put it over here. And my understanding is there were too many cooks trying to make the cake. It's just couldn't all the parties agree on everything. So they've just said, okay, just put it back where it was. Any questions or comments on this? If not, can I get a motion, please? Ms. Adams, you look like you have a question.
I sure do.
Go ahead.
You might know the deep details of what happened, Mr. Chair, but the council doesn't know, and I think we need to understand that because in one breath, yes, we were all on board, and then I can't quite remember. I remember we had long discussions and we held it in committee. I remember all of that, but I would like to know what happened and why they want to go back now and say, just put everything back the way it is. We never signed the agreements, but
that's right.
It just seems, you know what I mean? It just seems something's not quite settling for me. I'd like more details on this.
Okay, but understand it's not our
whatever.
It's not our money. It's Inmar's money, and they asked us to put it to the chamber. Mr. Raleigh, you can may know more. My information is it's just the details of how to do all this just got too complicated, and Inmar finally said, "Well, just the heck with it." But Mr. Raleigh, do you have any more?
So, Mr. Chair, does that mean that the whole process or whatever they were going to do with what's the organization downtown? Venture Cafe? The chamber, Venture Winston grants and all of that. So that's not going to go forward, right?
I can't comment on that. I think it's been delayed because of the COVID, but I don't know if it has or not. Mr. Mayor, you may have more than I know.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Pro Tem Adams, I think the chairman had it right. There were some issues regarding the way the county approved their participation in it. And I think there's still a commitment to this concept, Mayor Pro Tem Adams. I think it's probably going to be restructured a little bit, maybe with a little different way of putting the funds together. But got to go back to 2004, I guess it was, when we did this arrangement with Inmar. You know, we were about ready to lose Inmar to Atlanta, and these incentives were put in place and kept them here, allowed them to grow. Got almost 1,000 jobs there in the innovation corridor. So I think, Chairman, you're exactly right. It's just they stepped up to make this thing happen, and it didn't work. But I think they clearly deserve the monies. They've earned it based on their job creation and investment. So I think, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, I'll be glad to go offline with you and maybe bring you up to speed on the rest of it.
Yeah.
Yes, because thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was some other requests that the city council made, I thought, for the money for Inmar to expand their jobs, such as their diversity and inclusion and whatever. So yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that offline. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Inmar has never claimed any of their economic incentive money. It's all, and as I said, I think there was just COVID came in place. It was just too many moving parts. But this just basically sets it back where it was before we voted. And again, Inmar is yet to claim a penny, so it's really their option. But anyway, can I get a motion on this from someone?
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? I'll second. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, comments, please.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Taylor. I see you there.
I'll talk quickly. I think there are too many moving parts for me to make a decision tonight. I'd like to know a little bit more history about what happened and why, and hopefully get that information before Monday. But at this time, I'm probably going to have to abstain until I can get that information, or else I'll be into a no.
We'll try to get that for it. So I'll take you as the first vote. Mr. Taylor abstains. Ms. Adams?
I'll abstain.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
And Mr. Clark votes aye. Mr. Mayor, would you mind, you or Mr. Raleigh, contacting Ms. Adams and Mr. Taylor offline and going over all the details?
Absolutely.
I do. I appreciate it. Thank y'all very much. We will now go to G8.
Item G8, consideration of items regarding revisions to the agreement with Winston-Salem University for the lease of space in Union Station. Resolution authorizing revisions to the agreement with the Winston-Salem State University for the lease of space in Union Station, and the ordinance amending the annual appropriation and tax levy ordinance for the city of Winston-Salem for the fiscal year 2020-2021, and ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the city of Winston-Salem for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Okay. Mr. Rao, you're the staff member on this. If you please give us some history of what we've done so far and what this does.
Yes, sir. So back in November of last year, the mayor and council approved an agreement with Winston-Salem State to lease approximately 8,000 square feet of space on the second level of Union Station for $80,000 per year for 10 years, so approximately about $10 per square foot. The university plans to utilize that space for various operations, a passport acceptance agency, print shop, one-stop operation for enrollment management, campus tours, and their admission offices. After that approval, the university approached the city and had expressed interest in about 270 square feet of space in the ticket booth area on the third level, which is the street level area of Union Station. And so what's before you today is one amendment to basically allow for the lease of that space in order to keep the overall square footage the same at 8,000 square feet. About the same amount of space on the second level, just outside in the elevator lobby, will be considered common area space. So that's one amendment, and that actually had come to the Finance Committee here in recent months. In addition to that, city staff have been working with the architect on the upfit for the second level, and the initial cost estimates have come in well above the city's budget. And as part of the agreement, the city was going to provide a not to exceed amount of $300,000 for the upfit. The initial cost estimates came in at $815,000. From what I understand, the primary driver for that increase was additional HVAC work to support the space. I think that when the design was done on the second level, it was done with the assumption that there would be more of an open floor plan, and what the university is looking to utilize the space for requires more offices, individual office space, because of the types of work they would be doing in terms of with admissions and having more, I think, confidential discussions with prospective students. And so that's a large driver of that. But city staff and architect have gone back and they've done some value engineering. They've reduced the cost now from $815,000 to just over $642,000. In addition to that, the university has committed to providing $225,000 towards the upfit of the second level, and this will be in addition to what they were already planning to invest in for furniture and fixtures. So in order to move this project forward, the second amendment to the lease agreement before you today is to increase the city's not to exceed commitment from $300,000 to $450,000. So combined with the university's contribution, it would bring us up to a total project cost of $675,000, which would leave us some contingency for the project. So the item before you today is a resolution making those two amendments, the space on the third level, as well as increasing the city's not to exceed contribution to $450,000. The budget amendments that are also accompanying the resolution will be utilizing the part of the balance from the Union Station redevelopment project, and based on the commitments that have been made against that balance, we probably, after this item, would have under $100,000 remaining in uncommitted project balance, more like about $34,000.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Scipio, this is in your ward, even though you're not on the committee. Would you like to comment in any way?
Mr. Chair, no, I think this is pretty straightforward in what is being planned. And I would just like to continue to hear the discussion from finance.
Okay, thank you very much. This is in her ward. Do we have any questions or comments from any of the council members? Mr. McIntosh.
Well, I'm happy to see that we may actually have some revenue coming into this building here fairly shortly. I'm wondering why our lease rate change stayed the same when the upfit costs were driven up fairly dramatically by the tenant. Were we not able to pass any of that through? Was that lease rate that we agreed to sacrosanct? Why are we not making an adjustment on the revenue side?
Mr. Rao, and by the way, I'll get Ms. Adams to get to you next. Mr. Rao, can you comment on that?
Yes, sir. Councilmember McIntosh, I think that part of the consideration was the fact that the university was making a sizable, commitment towards the project as well. And so right now, I mean, what we need to is maintaining the same annual lease amount.
Thank you. Ms. Adams, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Finance Committee and Council, my concern again is the fact that this project in itself, years ago when we embarked on it, was supposed to not just benefit the university, it's supposed to help and benefit the community. And we often again talked about some incubator space or small business space for startup community businesses or minorities or whatever. And because we voted on a contract of $9 million to the school, basically to fix up the stadium to their liking, since they couldn't buy it per the state General Assembly. I just think, for me, I still think we have not fulfilled our responsibility when we used to hear from the citizens about the train station and them actively voting on the bond for us to be able to go do all this work. I do have a concern again with, it started out one way and then they told us what they were going to do, and oh, well, now we need the rest of this space. I have very high concerns about that, and I just do. I probably won't be supporting it again, or we hold it in committee, because what happened to the fact that we were supposed to have some minority community folks up in there with startup businesses? The school is government. It's even though it's part of the community like us, they're government.
Any other comments? And I'll comment here in a second.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Adams that we've probably gotten away from the original plan just a little bit. When we initially started to implement Union Station, we wanted to focus on transportation, but we also wanted to provide some opportunities for entrepreneurship and amenities. Now, Winston-Salem State has stepped up. They're going to provide some of those amenities, but we still haven't seen the entrepreneurship opportunities that we told the community that we'd be fighting for. So I think the scale is getting a little unbalanced. So I support Winston-Salem State University. I know Councilmember Adams does as well. And they will have a presence in that building, which I think is important. But I think we can't overlook, because of COVID and some of the other things that are happening in our community, we got to have opportunities for entrepreneurs, and that ticket booth space is very important and instrumental in doing that. So I won't be able to support Winston-Salem State getting the ticket booth space. I think that should be reserved for a small business opportunity, and that's where I am at this point.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rao, is there a time sensitivity to this if I hold it in committee for a month?
There is not. I mean, I think obviously the university would like to move forward, with the project, but we can continue in committee.
Okay, Ms. Parman has a question or comment. Ms. Parman?
Is this the last revision that we're going to do with Winston-Salem State as it relates to what they're going to implement in Union Station, or is there possible that next month or January they can be requesting additional space or whatever? Or is this the final thing that they're going to do at Union Station?
Okay. First off, let me say I'm going to, without objection, I'm going to hold this in committee for a month. I will say, and I believe it might have been this committee, I can't remember, COVID gets in the way, that we are developing an RFP for the third floor, which is the ground floor or the street level, for a restaurant, as far as coming up with the specifications and this, that, and the other. And Mr. Rao, do you know where we are on that? Because that would address the top level. And then the, what's that?
Mr. McCain.
Okay, Mr. McCain, can you address that? And before you do, I will also mention the first floor, which is the ground floor. We're moving the transportation department off of the third floor or some floor in the Stewart building, I believe. And that transition is starting to take place. So once that's done, we'll have an RFP for the third floor. Winston-Salem State would take the second floor, and the city's on the first floor. But with that, Mr. DeCane, can you comment on where we are on the restaurant specifications?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Clark. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the committee, members of the City Council. So you're correct. The actually DOT has completely moved into the track level spaces in Union Station. So they're in and operating out of there now. As far as the RFP goes for a proposed restaurant on the MLK floor, or what I would call the top floor, the ground floor, staff has drafted an RFP. It's being routed for review right now, and we're hopeful we can get that out by the end of the month and be looking for responses in the next 30 to 60 days.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Scipio, I see your hand.
Yes, could Mr. Duquesne also remind everyone that there were restrictions on the use of that building? At least 50%, I believe, had to be for transportation-related purposes. And so to that end, how much space is allowed for that? How much space did we have to have for transportation-related purposes, Mr. Duquesne?
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, Councilmember Scipio. So the response to that is greater than 50% of the facility has to be dedicated to transportation purposes. I don't have in front of me today. We have put that together as far as how many square feet that equals out to be. And greater than 30% of the building has to be dedicated to, I believe, government purposes. But as we move forward with the discussion regarding Mr. Rao's item, we can certainly bring all that information back.
Yep, that'd be very helpful.
Yes, sir.
Okay, guys, I have 3 more quick items to go over. Number 1, I do want to, for the record, state that I do serve on the board of trustees at Winston-Salem State University. I'm not compensated for that, and it has been checked by Raleigh several times, and I cannot recuse myself from Winston-Salem State city issues, even though I think if there ever was a conflict, it was the stadium. But anyway, just want to recognize that. Number 2, I do want to ask the staff, I'm going to call, I don't know if it's call someone's bluff or whatever, but at one of the other committee meetings, a staff member made the comment that a lot of the energy saving projects were self-funding. I would love for that to be true. I would like for the staff to bring back to this committee, and I'm going to start with the street lights. Can you really replace street lights and they pay for themselves is the question. So just bringing some information there. Actually, it's 4 things. Number 3, to the city attorney, going back to the issue with Inmar, the council voted to cancel the contract with him and go to this other arrangement. While we voted on it, the contract was never signed, or it's not a contract, I guess it's a legal document or whatever. Does that not in fact mean that the original agreement is still in place? I would just be curious to know about that. If you want to comment now, you can. She's in the room, so y'all, she's right here. As soon as she figures out how to do this.
I have to take myself off mute.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. Yes, the original contract is still in place. I just merely asked Evan to put forward a resolution for council to rescind the original resolution terminating the contract. To clean up the record.
But we still are going to keep that in committee and get more, not keep it in committee, but get more information to this Adams.
Right.
Lastly, by the way, we're getting a terrible echo.
You're on mute.
What's that?
You're on mute.
Oh. I just gave a wonderful speech and it was on mute. So anyway, what I said is staff is going to get back with Ms. Adams and Mr. Taylor on some more information there. Did y'all hear my thing about Winston-Salem State and the light fixtures and all that? Okay. I don't know how far to go back to go. Last meeting started, Mr. Hassad asked for a few minutes. So Mr. Hassad, you've been very patient. I'm going to give you 3 minutes and then we will adjourn. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, and the naming of the city council members for the opportunity to speak to you tonight in reference to the upcoming contract for the on-call structure adjustment. On July the 8th, we submitted a contract, a bid for the contract, and was basically the low bidder considering the specifications. Although there was another bidder, but they were unqualified and uncertified to even bid the project. After this episode went on, comes back to staff wants to take the requirement out, which requires all contractors to be pre-qualified and certified. And this is good. Goes for the general contractors as well as the subcontractors. This is the only rule in NCDOT regulations that levels the playing field for all contractors, be they white or black. And to take that requirement out of the bid specifications, you're openly saying that anybody can bid this contract with no experience. And I don't think the city's intention was to let anybody just bid these contracts. And I would like to respond to the city attorney, assistant city manager Damon's explanation of why he was taking it out of the bid. And he basically has misled the council in saying that these specifications have existed since 2014, and that is simply not true. All of the on-call contracts thus far, from 2010 forward, has been done by a certified individual, be it Ricky Mays of Mays Landscaping and Concrete or Ascent Construction. And we think it's totally unfair to take this out of the bid and then have us to bid against a company who don't have the same insurance requirements, don't have a safety record, are no way to even measure the safety index of a company if they're not pre-qualified and certified. And it is our hope that the staff not be allowed to do this.
Mr. Hassad, you got 10 seconds, sir.
Again, this will also put the general contractors and the subcontractors who already don't like the program, that's all they need to be able to say is you don't have to be pre-qualified if you're black. And when in fact, we don't get the work because you're black. You get the work because you're qualified and certified to do it. And,
okay.
And I just think it's totally unfair for them to do this to us in the middle of a bid process.
Thank you, Mr. Hassad. I will make a point myself personally of chatting with the parties involved there. The public safety meets next. Mr. Taylor, I'm looking at you. It's about 3 till 6, maybe 6:05, something like that.
Public safety will begin at 6:05.
6:05, public safety. We are adjourned.